Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, where we connect the wisdom and experience of ministry leaders to the realities of ministry in the trenches. We journey with ministry leaders through all the hidden aspects that help us to become fruitful ministers. Here at the Catholic Leadership Network podcast, we discuss the stuff that no one told you about Catholic ministry and strive to help ministry leaders succeed from the beginning. Our hosts are Christy Cabaniss, the Director for Missionary Discipleship for the Diocese of Cleveland, and Sarah Jarzembowski, the Director for Marriage and Family Life at St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish in Crofton, Maryland. Please show your support for our efforts by clicking like and subscribe and commenting below. And now here are Sarah and Christy. There we go. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening and watching our podcast. Welcome to the Catholic Leadership Podcast, where we talk about all those things that nobody told you about ministry, but we probably should know, right? We are here today, Christy and I are here today with Marilyn Santos, friend and colleague. She's the Associate Director of the Secretariat of Evangelization and Catechesis at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Previously, she served as the Director for Missionary Education at the National Office of the Pontifical Mission Society in the United States. She's held leadership positions in youth and young adult, cultural diversity ministries, the Archdiocese of Atlanta, the Diocese of Brooklyn, the Diocese of Metuchen. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that, Marilyn. Wow. Marilyn was the president of LARED, the National Catholic Hispanic Youth Ministry Network, and consultant to the USCCB Secretariat for Laity, Marriage, Family Life, and Youth. She's lived as a missionary with the Salesian Sisters in Ecuador. Workshops all over the place, diocese, conference, meetings. Let's do the alphabet soup here. We've got NCEA, NCCL, NFCYM, LARE Congress, Mid-Atlantic Congress. Oh my gosh, Marilyn. I'm tired just reading that. My goodness. All right, Marilyn, I have just loved working with you. Oh, that's all in Spanish, so I'm not going to read that part because I would butcher it, and my Spanish friends, I do not want to do that to you. I respect you too much. Marilyn, we have been friends probably from the beginning of ministry. I don't even know the first time we met, but I know that you and your experience has been super helpful to me and to my husband throughout the years. And Paul and I've just been so happy to walk with you through this and all of your various opportunities. So thank you for being here. Christy, when we talked about bringing somebody on, you were tops of our list as Christy's Star Wars buddy. So we're really glad that you're here today.
Well, I'm glad that you threw that in for me, Sarah, because I was waiting for the moment.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and it's funny because as you were reading that, bio, usually the same thought goes through my head. Actually, there's three thoughts. One is nobody really cares. And the other thing is that people must be thinking either A, this chick cannot keep a job, or boy, is she old.
But you know what? I was looking at my CV the other day, and I was thinking something similar. Like, there's a lot on here, but I don't feel like I've done a lot. Right? Like, I don't feel like there's a lot to pump me up or, that I can say that I've done. But I feel like, I don't know, maybe that's the imposter syndrome coming in. Is like, I don't feel like I've done enough to warrant this, double-sided CV that I've got.
And here I'm on the other side scraping and clawing all the time. Like, do you guys know what I have done?
But Christy, you had a career before working in the church. Like you were in the military, and that was a career in itself. And you raised a family and all of that. And you've done your stuff.
It's like Sarah and I are lifers.
We are.
You guys are lifers. Someone just asked me that question the other day, like I was a lifer. Like, Christy, what drew you to get your degrees in theology even? And I was like, dude, that was like in my 30s whenever I started that process. So Yeah, that's not it. But anyway, oh my gosh, Marilyn, thank you so much for being here. This is so exciting. Just for the listener, like back in the day, still a little bit, still I get starstruck because like I am a church nerd and I think that the USCCB is like the coolest place on earth. And the fact that Marilyn works there, like I'm like, whoa. So I always feel like I need to be careful. Because sometimes I can dork out a little bit. But anyway. Let's start at the top of this conversation today, Marilyn. For you, working for the Secretariat for Evangelization and Catechesis at the highest really level in the United States, what do you use for the church? What church documents do you find that you're referencing often in your ministry?
That's a great question. And the two things, I mean, and I hate to sound geeky and nerdy like church cookie, but it's the catechism of the church. It's what we believe, it's what we teach, and also the directory for catecheses. As you ladies, I'm sure know, we've had many versions of it. I think the first one, forgive me if I'm misquoting, was in the early 70s, and then it was updated in the late 90s, and then until in 2020, which I still can't believe it was 2020 because I still referred to it as the new directory, and I realized it's been 5 years. It's not the new directory anymore, but those are key. But I think the important thing to remember is that they were never meant to be blueprints or a step-by-step how-to. The catechism just basically has the teachings, but there's no methodology in it. This is what, as Catholics we believe and we should know, gradually as our faith develops. And then the directory is really the other piece of it. It's really, it's a guideline for methodology. It's a guideline that reminds us, what are the areas that are important. What I love about the new directory, and some of us jokingly say that it should have properly been called the Directory for Evangelization, but then nobody would have bought it because they would have been confused. Because, and I'm be really clear, I'm not saying that the previous directories were incorrect or that there was something wrong with them, but, as we in the church believe in that, right, we look at the signs of the times. What this directory did, it reminded us and properly placed that at the heart of what we do, it's evangelization. And that catechesis is then a tool that then supports those that we are accompanying, in their faith journeys and that we're evangelizing. So, the new directory just really highlights popular piety. Of course, I'm sure you too. It actually has that one section that really calls out women, which was really lovely to see. So yeah, those are, and of course, the papal encyclicals, particularly Pope Francis, actually all of them were very prolific. I mean, they seemed like they were always turning things out. I would say that the two of the Evangelii Gaudium, which was Holy Father Francis's, may the Lord continue to improve his health, really became, and that I am going to call a blueprint. He really, he presented to the Universal Church the vision that had started in Latin America. A lot of us who read it, and again, you probably know this, in Latin America, they all get together, no set years. They get together when they feel that there's something that needs to be addressed. So it was under Pope Benedict, they got together in Brazil, in Aparecida, and they named the document. They always named their documents on the city it was held in. So the Aparecida document really talked about missionary desire. So when Evangelii Gaudium came out, those of us who were familiar with it, was kind of funny because we're reading it, and we're saying, the Pope is he plagiarizing? There's a lot here. And then, not too soon after, we discovered that the principal writer of Aparecida was Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio. So then the pieces all kind of made sense. But the one that I've actually rediscovered lately, which I would really recommend everybody reads, is Evangelii Nuntiandi, Paul VI, because Francis refers to it as the greatest pastoral document written to date. And he always, Evangelii Gaudium quotes a lot from it. So because it really, with Paul VI, and yet it could have been written today. I think it's a really good reminder of what mission really is, what evangelization should be, and what it isn't. And of course, there's Christus Vivet, there's all those goodies that I'm sure we all have. Like, I don't know if you guys are like me, but I will get the electronic version because it's handy, but there's nothing like having a book in my hand. So I'll get both. Um, you know what also is I think we should be paying more attention to is every year the Holy Father puts out a world missionary message. World Mission Sunday celebrated in October, but he puts that out usually January or February. And this year, obviously, he's tying it into the Jubilee. So the title this year is Missionaries of Hope Among All Peoples. And yeah, so that's like in a nutshell, that's what we keep on our shelves, on our desks, on our tablets, on our laptops, and anything that we, the bishop, as you know, give us our priorities. The bishops on the committee are the ones who decide what are the areas we should be focusing on, and then we as staff assist them in making it so, to use Star Trek language. and those are the documents that we really lean into.
Oh, wow.
Wow, there's a lot that you just kind of let me go back to the beginning here.
Okay.
I took a page out of Christy's book and I got my catechism spiral bound. I got my directory for catechesis, spiral bound. I got like a bunch of them bound, even the new Listen, Teach, Send spiral bound. And I've been praying through the directory. Like when I was budgeting last year and then again this year, I went back to, and I don't have it with me to quote, but paragraph 75, 76, where it talks about catechesis of the whole person, mind, body, spirit, and like just going through the whole emotion and the whole person is who we are working with, right? And who we are journeying with. And, I brought it to staff meeting probably last year. I was on for prayer. I'm like, here we go. We're budgeting. This is what we're doing. And the pastor, before I even started, looked at me. He's like, you do know this is prayer, right? I'm like, yes, let's pray. And I took 75, 76, and we prayed through that, and what are some of the things that just stand out to you? Where do you feel the movement of the Spirit in our ministries? Just these two paragraphs, and it started a great conversation. So folks, if you don't have the directory, I highly encourage you to snag one.
And I love that. I love that you did, because I agree. I sometimes I've said that if it's possible to love an inanimate object, I love this directory, and I do. And when I first read it, I really did feel like it was a spiritual reading. That as you read it, you do. I think one of my favorite. Don't have the number memorized, but one of my favorite parts is where he identifies the three elements of who a catechist is. You're an evangelizer, a mystagogue, and a teacher. And I think it's important. It was not a coincidence that teacher is the third one, because the evangelizer and the mystagogue are the primary. That's how we should be seeing ourselves. And then when the time is appropriate, I think the directory says, then you start the teachings. The teaching.
Yeah. Teaching really it comes in after we've kind of tilled the soil in so many other ways. We can't just plant the seeds without tilling the soil. And I think that those first two really just kind of make an individual ready to receive that in a way that is profound and transcendent and transformative.
Absolutely. You know what, you guys, I'm trying to look up the author so that I can tell you. It's Rachel Botsman. I'm reading this book right now that's called How to Trust and Be Trusted. And I'm really having a revelation about what evangelization can be, because I know that the world that we are living in is like super aggressive towards people of faith. And so how can we be able to share our story with others, but also I think listen for their stories? But part of that is trust. And I think that there needs to be this basis for I can give you things that are sacred to me and that you will also hold them safe. Not that you necessarily will agree with me or, that we're kind of come out on this at the same end, but I think that that's it. Like, in order to evangelize, we need to have a trust relationship with another person. And then after that, teaching can come into play. But yeah, not until we've built the relationship with another person, which then leads me to the part in what you said at the beginning to Meredith, Marilyn, is that like these documents are not the blueprint for what we want to look at, and they're not speaking necessarily to methodology, which I think gives consternation, especially to the new folks that are just starting out in ministry. So what do you think, like in the realm of good formation, how can we figure out what that is?
That's a great question. I think the directory speaks about that, and when it refers to the particular churches, and really what that whole section is that, other than what's in the catechism, like we know content, but where you start and how you transmit that, the first thing that needs to happen is what you said. You have to build a relationship. You have to know who's in front of you.
Mm.
So what we're calling good formation, there is no one formula, right? There's there's a test, whatever, or litmus test, I would say, then, because I don't, how do you test the faith? But if there's any kind of guide that is, how much more and more in love are people falling in love with Jesus? How much more does their curiosity, how much more are they asking, that they want to know more? um you used the word aggressive before, and I think it goes the other way as well, that we as the evangelizers cannot be aggressive.
Right.
Yes, others are aggressive towards us, but sometimes, and I'd like to believe, with all the good intentions, but that we just want people to fill their heads with things and expect them to spit it out, and they believe it. So yeah, good formation. There's no, I'm repeating, there's no model, because it depends on your situation. It depends on geographically, it depends on economy, it depends on the age, it depends on the gender, it depends on what's going on at home. Quick story, I taught fourth grade many, many, many years ago, and the core curriculum, one of them was the Beatitudes and the Commandments. And I taught in a very lower income school on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where a lot of my kids came from broken homes. I was very aware that I had students in there who had been the victims of child abuse from their parents. So how do I teach the fourth commandment
Right.
as is? I can't just say, and you have to believe this, right?
Yeah.
So, so my formation with them was, we took our time and we took it apart, and then I would always refer to the greatest commandment is love God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself. So you know what I mean? So you have to just, yeah. And it's hard work. Those of you who are, in the diocese in Port Sarah, who's still working in a parish, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy. It's not easy, because it's not just picking up this textbook and assuming that everybody's on the same page. It's adapting. And at the end of the day, if they still have a love in their heart for the church and its teachings and want to know more, then I would then qualify that as good formation.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you shared that story. Thank you so much. I think, there's so many times that I've been in the middle of a teaching and looking at these beautiful, amazing children and think, okay, what if they take that to the extreme? We've got to be real careful with this. Um, we were just talking about showing love within a family last night, and one of the kids is like, I asked, how do you know when someone in your family loves you? Well, they hug and kiss you, right? Well, in this era of child and youth protection, as long as you have given approval, right? As long as you have consented, right? So, like, there's a lot that, like, these little nuances that even our littlest little ones can start to really process. And if we're too black and white on things, it can get very difficult for them to comply, for lack of a better word. Um, And then, they're the problem child, or, they're, acting out or things like this, but they're not. They're really trying to reconcile with what they're hearing and what they know, like in their real life, what they know. So thank you for sharing that. That commandment has come up as a difficulty for a couple of people that I know, adults included. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I want to can I say too, as a person that grew up with domestic violence, that I appreciate you both acknowledging it, because I can't even tell you how many times I've been in a room and someone says always or never about parental figures or what our relationship to that is. And I think that we've come around to, people having a lot more often. I think we hear about father issues, but there are also mother issues, and that we just need to be gentle, I think, in our language. It's building that awareness and recognizing that not in today's day and age, there's a lot of brokenness, and that not everybody's coming from this ideal. And so even in that case, like, I think that the way that we could talk about it is that God the Father is not like any earthly father. Those words should be part of it. Mary, our mother, is not like any earthly mother that you've ever experienced. This is the best, most amazing, most tremendous experience that you could possibly have. And that they both, God and our Mama Mary, like, they want to help us heal those wounds. So there's room, I think, in there to have that conversation. But I want to just say real quick, not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but thank you both for pointing it out and being aware of it.
Well, thank you, Christy. And again, thank you for being open about that, because I think that sometimes the children have shame and it's not their shame. So I think, and the other piece, Sarah, when you mentioned the hug, again, part of another example of getting to know who's in front of you, that's where the cultural differences come as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be aware that in, this particular, and how do we become aware? You get to know the people who are in front of you.
Yeah. It's real interesting. We're talking about relationship here, and we're moving, or have moved, from a traditional model of catechesis. Classroom style is no longer, to family formation. And Archbishop Laurie has put it out there that he wants us all to do family formation. And I love it. I think it's great. I think our families have learned a lot over the last couple of years. But one of the pushbacks I get from parents is, so when are our kids going to learn their prayers? When are the kids going to learn, their Bible story, or something that was very important to them as a child? And I say, well, you can teach them that anytime. Like, there's nothing stopping you from sharing that. Like, that sounds like it was really formative for you, but talking to them about that relationship. I mean, do you know Jesus? Do you know what it means to have a relationship? What does that look like? Are you sharing that with your children? This is where we want to go, because your kids can get knowledge from anywhere nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, they can Google the right answer. They put it into Chat GPT and it'll be 90% right. We can take care of the other 10% later, but it'll be 90% right. So they'll get the facts. They'll get the information. What they can't get from that or a book is how to listen to the Holy Spirit in their body and soul. So how are we doing that? And the resources that we use are doing pretty well with some of that, but it's really connecting with the parents. Like, we're teaching something a little bit different here. I had a dad say, when are they going to get the stuff? Like, when are they going to start learning? I'm like, oh, we need to have a conversation here. Let me, so it's interesting. That whole relationship is so hard for people to understand.
I love that you guys, that Archbishop Laurie has really instituted that family, because a lot of times I personally think where we went wrong, if I can put it that way, in the U.S. and maybe other places, but we know the U.S. best, is we focus too much on the child, and really, and what we should have been partners with the parents,
Yes.
more all along, because a lot of these parents, are the product, depending on the age gap, but are the product of formation that was head first, and sometimes, or if at all, talked about heart and relationship. So I do think that the refocusing on the families and the parents, because I'm sure Sarah, and way back when I was in a parish, I would hear it, sometimes aggressively, to use that word again, and sometimes very honestly and almost sadly, I can't give them because I don't know either. So you teach my child because I don't know. Yeah. So I do think that if we can support parents and, with gentleness sometimes, and recognizing that sometimes what comes across as aggressive is because they're embarrassed.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that whole it's a reaction to the shame that they feel about them not knowing or not being sure. And the other thing is what I've been saying is and send me the emails later, guys, about what I'm about to say, but we've been doing the same model for a long time and we are not actually getting good results. So we've got to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, look at the numbers, they're coming down, and it's the parents that we're seeing now that were in, CCD classes and religious ed, where we were talking about all of these like stuff and things of the faith, which are not important, but they're not getting to the core of what the relationship is. And I remember there was a time whenever I was in a parish and I was we were preparing children for confirmation, and I had one that was a little bit older than some of the others. The family had moved and whatever. And so I was talking to the mom more one-on-one because of how we were working for the formation. And at some point she said to me, Christy, when did this whole relationship stuff start? Because I grew up in the church, and I'm thinking that this woman was, probably in her mid late 40s at the time. And I grew up in the church, and my husband converted to Catholicism after we got married, and we've been raising our kids Catholic. And I personally never heard this language. My husband heard it whenever he went through the initiation process. My son has heard it through his Catholic school of all things. And I when did that start?
And did you tell her with Jesus?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Of course. Yeah. I was like, I think it's always been, but I think that this is part of the thing that whenever Pope Francis and others speak about ministry being messy, that's it. When you start to dig into relationship, it's complicated. We've already mentioned just a few things that can add to the complications of what that relationship is. So that brings me to another question that we have for you today, Marilyn, is like, how do we balance that, meeting people where they are and kind of digging into comprehensive content that, like Sarah's saying, like, when are they going to learn the prayers and the stuff and the things?
That's I wish I had the perfect answer. Yeah, and I hate to sound like a cop out, but it depends on who's in front of you. And to go back to my teaching days, I don't know if you probably heard this, where teachers were taught many, many years ago to teach to the middle.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And that doesn't work, because 2/3 of the people in front of you lose, right? Those who need more and those who are ready to go forward. So, again, it's the models, and you mentioned it. We need to switch up the model, that it's not a replication of school, because even in our schools, but that's another podcast, that we shouldn't be teaching kids at desks, but that's for another podcast. But but particularly, and again, the directory talks about that. I paraphrased it, but because it doesn't say it this way, but there's a whole section in the directory that basically says classroom model bad. Yeah, it's how do we know what people really need? We need to get to know them, and there's nothing wrong with knowing the prayers. Obviously, that's important, but it's having a grasp or an understanding of what we're saying in those prayers is more important than being able to rotely. And when I was still in the classroom, and actually then also a DRE in the parish, I didn't expect the kids to memorize them. We would do a deep dive into what does each sentence, sometimes even what does each word mean, and then the memorization. And then I would say, and then it's good to memorize them, because then, in your moments of prayer, they come easily. but then I would say, and if you don't have them memorized, that's why God made books and leaflets. It's the act of contrition.
Yeah.
That is one that I found
Yes.
that too many catechists were spending way too much time in getting the kids to memorize it, and they didn't even know what they were saying.
Yes.
The parish that I worked in at that point was a Salesian parish, which is obviously that's their charism is young people. What we did was in the confessionals, or actually we would hand to the kids, we would hand it to them on a piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
so that they could focus on the sacrament and what was actually happening, and not sit there all worried. When is it? Where in the script is it time for me to say this? Oh, and do I have it memorized? So I think
So
that's
stressful.
it's very stressful, and it doesn't help you enter into the sacramental moment that's really happening. So I do think that, what do people really need? It's let's take our cues from them, and back to the parents saying, when are they going to learn stuff? Meet. It's first of all, your first answer was perfect, Sarah. Parents are first catechists, right? So is you are you saying prayers when you're kid at night?
Yeah.
Because that's a wonderful time to learn the prayers. Night prayers. So it's, again, like I said, I wish I had the magic answer, but as you said, ministry is messy. And if you're trying to minister to a migrant family, what that's going to look like and what their needs are going to be a lot different than what we used to call the typical family who presents their child for the Wednesday night or the Sunday, faith formation class, etc. The needs are gonna change because we're human beings, and now I'm gonna say something that's gonna sound really, really corny, but what we all need is we need Jesus.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
true.
I mean the thing is I don't remember in scripture where Jesus was giving the religious ed test or
Mm-hmm.
telling everyone if this isn't memorized by the time you get to the gates of heaven you're out, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't and I don't know what publisher or program that he used with the disciples, but
No, because again, I remember particularly with Pope Francis, and every pope has had their detractors. I mean, I want to make
sure.
that really clear. But I know that one of the criticisms, I'll say, of Pope Francis for over the years has been that he's too liberal. And I always actually, my standard answer became, that's interesting because I actually see him as the most traditional pope that we've ever had because he's going way back to the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other is I would say to all of those detractors, go
Um,
ahead and watch that interview where he sat with young adults because that was one of the moments where the way that he responded to some of the issues that they brought up, I was a little like eyebrows raised, like that is not what I thought that you were going to say in this moment. So anyway, but
Right, right. He never said anything that contradicted what we believe.
not at all.
no.
But
No.
he was open, and he was receptive. Something you said, Christy, earlier, that, and I still love you even if you don't believe what I believe.
Yes.
That's what came across.
Yeah.
Yes. And because I think that what I saw too from that interview, like with the Pope with his wisdom, and I think this is somewhere that we can all be, is to let go of what the deadlines are, because I think that that's what holds us back so much,
Mhm.
and realize that people have their entire life. Now, we don't know how long their life is, I'll give you that, but like reasonably, we can probably imagine that the 7-year-old has a little bit longer than the 3 months prior to their first Eucharist reception to learn about the Eucharist. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that kind of thing to like let these things unfold. And I can say that as a personal witness, like my own faith journey has revealed that for me. The day that I was confirmed, which by the way was as an adult, folks, but the day I was confirmed, I wasn't sure how I felt about Mary. Now she's everywhere in my life. You know what I mean? So like you let these things happen for people at the rate at which they can receive them too.
Yeah.
And we have to make it that okay. Because
Yeah.
Yes.
the message, sometimes subtly and sometimes not so subtly, that we do send is that it is a test. And if you haven't passed these benchmarks, then there's something wrong with you, or you're not ready
Yeah.
to receive, or whatever it is.
And I want to say something and Sarah, I get $1 because I haven't mentioned this name in a very long time.
You haven't.
She knows where I'm going.
I do.
Brene Brown defines shame as there's something about me that if you knew it, I do not have belonging or love. And so that's shame, guys. We're setting families up to have shame around the Lord. That's ridiculous. That's exactly the opposite of what Jesus was trying to do for us. Like, let go of the shame. You belong. You have a place here. I love you. And so I think that if we can let go of those timelines a little bit, and if we can loosen up on our programmatic approach, we can find the creative space to meet the people where they are and really listen to what's going on in their lives. I was thinking about like how whenever I was the DRE, what I would try to do is give parents like, here is if you want them to learn the act of contrition, we are going to have it there. But like, here's a little small piece of paper. I'll give you several. Stick it on the bathroom mirror. Stick it on the refrigerator. Where are the normative times in your life that, you would want to introduce this, and that you guys can just pray it together at the end of the night, beside, on the bedside table, whatever. But with a migrant family, where are those normative places where these things can come into play, or the family where there's domestic issues, where does that come into play? Like us knowing people, and I think to some degree letting ourselves be known is how we have a relationship with them.
I'm so glad you brought up shame, Christy, and our friend who doesn't know we're friends, Brene Brown. I hear a lot of shame from my parents. I mean,
Yeah.
I hear a lot of it. I'm sorry, I'm so behind. You haven't done anything. I'm sorry, Sarah, we haven't gotten everything here. I don't know, and we're really sorry that we've not done anything, like they failed me. And I was reminded last week, I posted everybody that, I went to the meeting, I went to the regional meeting, and I'm glad that I did, because one of the takeaways that was brought to my attention from longtime listener, Rena Black, she said, something for us all to remember is when it comes to sacraments, there's a minimum age, but there's not a maximum age. Right. So when we talk about 7 years old for reconciliation communion, we're not talking second grade. It has to be done in second grade. We're talking 7 years old is the minimum, right? We're shifting our confirmation to 9 years old. Archbishop said 9 years old, not fourth grade, right? 9 years old is the minimum, right? That we want to be able to offer children the graces of these sacraments. Right? They don't necessarily have to be fully ready, Christy, as you mentioned, we have to be open to the graces that will be received at that sacrament, right? That's the external of what's already internally happening. That's the external visible of what's already happening in our children. So they don't have to be adults. They don't have to know. They don't have to fully accept. They don't have to all of this. But that 7 years is the minimum. And if they're not ready at 7, then that's not when God wants them to be ready. And ready is not, I know these prayers. Ready is, I am open to receiving this sacrament. I'm open to receiving these graces. I'm not being forced to do this. Right. And
Right.
that conversation last week at this regional meeting was just like boom, 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 boom. And I mentioned that to a couple of people this week, that it just kind of blew their mind. That's right. This is a minimum. God's going to receive us whenever.
And ready also doesn't mean that I no longer have questions.
Correct.
So what you said, but I'm open to it, as you said, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, back when I was in the parish, it was confirmation, and I was young, so this is totally the Holy Spirit, or when you're young,
Yeah.
you're too stupid to realize that's what you're doing. And I had a young man who it went beyond questions. He really didn't want to receive. I mean, I developed a relationship enough with him. That's a Salesian charism, that he was really honest with me. Because I mean, his thing went down to that he didn't even know if he believed in God.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I actually met with the parents, and thank goodness the pastor, Father Mark, backed me up on it. And our recommendation to the parents was Carlos is not going to receive the sacrament. Yeah, the parents' heads almost exploded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They were angry. And no matter how much Father and I really explained, and he didn't receive, but he was still really, really active in the parish youth ministry. So I think it was less than 2 years later, he did receive the sacrament of confirmation.
Nice.
And it was one of those, tear-filled, blah, blah, blah moments where, mom and dad very emotionally thanked us, because, now Carlos was home, openly sharing. Anyway, so basically it's, being forced, you said, and I love that you are removing the grade attached to it, because again, we've shot ourselves in the foot. We the church, we say it's faith formation, we say it's relational, and then when we attack grades to it, we make it school.
Yeah.
We make it school.
Well,
so I love you guys have a new minimum of 9. I actually did a paper when I was working on my master's on restored order. And I know that, I think it's Hawaii and someplace else, they've gone there, and I'm fascinated by it, because even the Baltimore Catechism, right? People who did that. What's the definition of a sacrament? Grace. It's a grace freely given. We don't earn it.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Marilyn, I want to jump on a soapbox that you just put out for me about the school model, and us doing that. Is we've got to be careful, because when we set things up in this achievement model, like what school looks like, it ends up, especially in the United States, like these days, kids are like, some kids are good at English, some kids are good at social studies, some kids are good at math, some are good at art. And then what happens as you get to high school or whatnot is you stop kind of doing those subjects that you're not super great at. You go get a degree in the subjects that you are good at, and you never worry about, like, I joke around and say, I did theology because they said there would be no math. But what we set up subliminally for people is that some people could be good at God and some people are not.
Exactly.
And I think that that's the model that our parents these days are under, which is why they feel ashamed to come and say, I'm not good at this, because the model we set up for them was that there was a possibility that they could be bad at it.
It's also one of my soapboxes as well. I think it's nationwide now, but when I was still in the classroom in New York, the Arch of New York was one of the first to require standardized testing in religion.
Ouch.
And I think it is nationwide now. And again, I'm very lucky that the school environment that I worked in was open. And I said to Sister, again, 4th grade, Beatitudes, Commandments, and time for the test, right? And I knew that a lot of my kids didn't have them memorized. So I said, Sister Roble, I have a question. I said, in my classroom, as part of my classroom environment, as we call it, I have posters up with these things. Do I have to take them down for the test? And she said to me, when did you put them up? And I said, in the summer, as I was getting my classroom ready, and she said, then don't take them down. She goes, if you had put them up intentionally to help the children on the test, that's one thing. But if they've been part of your classroom and they're smart enough to figure out that the answer's on the wall, leave it up.
That's so great.
Because what we were there. Well, because at the end of the day, what we were pushing back is, how do you grade someone's faith?
Yeah.
How do you put a letter or a number, depending on the system that you're working in, on someone's faith? Because as you said, I had kids who struggled reading. So they may not have done well on a written test, not because they don't know the faith, but because they don't know how to read.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's an issue, and in our faith formation programs in our parishes, especially because time is so limited. What even if, let's say, you have 90 minutes, by the time they arrive and everybody settles in and then dismiss or whatever is that's going on, your actual content time. So we have to be more creative, and it's not just open the textbook, but as the kids are entering the space, do you have an activity for and thankfully, let me not totally dump on our friends in the publishing world.
No, we
A
need
lot of
them
us are
too.
recognizing that, and the materials that they're producing are not just textbooks.
Yeah.
They're actually activities and things to help so that the learning is and it's tactile or it's visual or it's oral and it's not just opening up and read pages 3 to 5 and now you know everything that you need to know in order to graduate, you know, into the following level of formation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One model that I've seen, and Sarah, this is real tricky, but I'm fascinated by it, where they get to know the children that are presented, you know, for the parish programs,
Mhm.
and then there's a little bit of a team because I think the DRE and the pastor they cluster the kids not by age, but where they think they're at,
Mm.
and that's a lot of work, but it's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, we do conversations with parents each year before we get started. So we're going to start to kind of see some of that
Mm-hmm.
this year,
Yeah.
shifting around where we're putting them. I am noticing the time.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I
Way
looked over and I
past
was like,
six. Yeah, right. All right. So we do have one final question for you, Marilyn. We would love to know, what do you wish you knew about ministry when you first started?
What do God, you would actually, because full disclosure, I know that this is what you usually ask,
Yeah.
and I'm praying about it and thinking about it, and the list is so long um, that I think a lot of what we've actually been talking about this, you know, um, I wish I had known that the classroom model wasn't the most effective. You know, I wish I'd known that from day one. I wish, you know, because I'm a product of my own faith formation, right?
right.
So you know, I wish that I had known that, you know, it wasn't important to memorize things, that the relationship I'm blessed. And I think when I do, especially with my spiritual director, you know, sometimes I talk about, you know, what we started at the top of this, the moves that I've made, and what he made me realize that it's not that I have failed or been bored, it's that I've always been on the same path and it's hope it's you know trying to help the Lord, you know, evangelize his people. So I guess I wish I had known that. I wish I had known um, that I have to rely more on others and not just myself. And so humility, you know what? I'm going to say that. I wish I had realized that ministry takes a lot of humility. That would probably be the number one. That that frequently I don't have the answer, and it's okay for me to let the people in front of me know that I don't have the answer. You know, if you know if somebody asks a question, it's okay. It's not shameful for me to say, you know what, I don't know, but what I should say is I don't know, but let's find out together.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say that ministry takes a lot of humility
Yeah.
and prayer. I wish I had known early on that I needed to double up on my prayer life. You know, the whole Martha Mary thing. Um,
Yes.
Yeah.
I have forced to be more Mary than Martha.
That's hard.
Yes, it is. And I
That's
know you,
hard.
both of you, so I know that you suffer from the same syndrome.
What? I don't know what you mean.
Sorry. The voices go like 17 octaves high.
Never.
As I twirl my hair.
That's how you know it's crap.
Well, Marilyn, thank you so much for your time. This conversation has been really powerful.
Yeah.
So much for me to just, you know, dig back into and pray about in our conversation. And I'm going to pull out my national directory and continue to highlight and pray with that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate you being part of our conversations. Let us know in the chat what speaks to you. Let us know what other topics you'd like us to chat about, or if you would like to come on our podcast as well. You don't have to work at the USCCB or a national organization to come onto our show. We're all real people here. Marilyn's like real people. I mentioned at the top, we all went out to watch Star Wars together. So we are real people. Star Wars buddies.
And we all are counting the days until baseball season officially starts.
Yes, we are. Very soon, very soon. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining today's podcast. Please click the like and subscribe. And if you find this important to the conversations you're having in your local ministry, please share and join the conversation in the comments below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Catholic Leadership Network podcast.